Hi, my name is Becky Jennings, and this is the Responsible Parenting Podcast. I give you the transformational tools to stop reacting to your children in the moment and start responding with intention.
Before we dive into the episode, I want to share my free guide to managing our kids' meltdowns. We know that meltdowns are normal, but they still suck and can be ridiculously triggering. This 4-step free guide will help you break the cycle of reactivity and help you get through the meltdown without snapping yourself. Don't join your kid in the tantrum. Grab my free guide and learn how to manage meltdowns like a pro. Head to responsablepparenting.ck.page/meltdown, or just go and click the link in my show notes and get your guide today. Okay, let's get to the episode.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Responsible Parenting. I'm your host, Becky Jennings, and I'm really excited about today's episode because a couple episodes back, episode 34, I talked about the 4 buckets that you need to be aware of and filling on a regular basis to really help with your child's capacity, to help with your child's ability to maximize their readiness, to comply with our requests, to feel engaged in our relationship, to find less coercive paths and less resistant paths with our children. So that whole episode was about the 4 buckets you need to fill for your children. And as I was speaking to a client, it dawned on me that these are actually 4 central buckets that we need to fill within ourselves so that we are not forcing ourselves to comply with whatever we have to do. So we are more ready, we have more capacity, and we have the ability to be in connection and communion with our children. So in that episode 34, if you haven't listened to it, I recommend going back. We talked about the 4 buckets as being power and control, connection and attention, regulation, and play. So those were to maximize our child's readiness and ability to comply and be a part of a family system where we're all working together towards a goal, where we're all a cohesive unit, where there's more harmony, where there's just more ease. But if we are not satisfying that within ourselves, then we are basically coming from a place of dysregulation and we're trying to regulate a child, or we're trying to fill a bucket from an empty cup. We cannot regulate a dysregulated child when we ourselves are dysregulated. We cannot fill these central buckets when we ourselves are empty in these buckets. So how can we as parents start to slow down, zoom out, and see where these central buckets within ourselves are not satisfied, where these buckets are not filled or even partially filled within ourselves? So let's talk about power and control. This one seems like an obvious for our children, right? They're being told what to do all day, every single day. They don't really have a lot of autonomy in what their day looks like. They don't have a lot of say in maybe their routine, or they don't have a lot of choice. But do we? Not really. Not really. We are also kind of confined in a rigid structure of what has to be done. We are kind of confined in our role as the primary caregiver, or as our role as mom or dad or spouse or whatever it is, or job, right? These things take up the bulk of our time, the bulk of our energy, and they automatically kind of dictate what our day looks like. So what I have found is I might have a little bit of resistance or resentment towards being out of control in those areas, to not having choice. So where can we start to build that choice into our day? Where can we start to give ourselves more power? Where can we start to take back some of that control in our life, what our life looks like? If you feel like you're just kind of like at the mercy of the system, that will build a lot of resentment in our bodies. And that will actually not come out on the system. That's going to come out on our children, because for whatever reason, because of how things have been passed down, it is deemed okay to snap, to yell, to let our dysregulation pour out onto our children. So our children are going to be our dumping grounds for our lack of feeling in control of what's going on around us. So how can we start to shift the energy in that power and in that control so that we can start to take ownership more of how our day looks, or at least how our day feels? If you have absolutely no control over what your day looks like, can you control what your day feels like? How can you start to add in these pockets of time, add in these split seconds where you take back control of how you feel inside your body? Now, connection and attention. This is really about that one-on-one special time with our children, where when they feel seen, heard, and understood, they are so much more able and willing to comply, to hear our requests and not fight back to them. So, how much attention and how much connection are you giving yourself? Do you know what parts of you are driving the ship? Do you know what parts of you are more active? What parts of you are so tired and want to give the reins over to another part who's screaming in the background saying, choose me, choose me? What parts of you are fully taking over, and what parts can you give more attention to? What parts of you can you connect to that have been muted or silenced or pushed away? I know for me, worthiness was in the background screaming for a long time, saying, please choose me, where perfection was running the show over and over and over again. And that perfectionist little part of me was so run down and tired, where I could turn to worthiness and say, would you like to take a little bit of a stab at this? Do you want to see what you can do in this part? Right? And how can I nurture that? How can I attune to that quiet part of me that is also really desperate to speak, that quiet part of me who really wants to be heard? How can I attune to that and give it a few minutes of connection? That might look like putting your hand on your heart and putting one on your belly and taking 5 deep breaths and saying, what part of me is quiet right now? And what part of me wants to be seen right now? What part of me am I pushing aside? And you know that part of you because it's this gentle nudging in your body, this silent voice that's saying, like, I'm here, right? Those are the parts that we kind of push aside because maybe it's going to take too much time, or I don't have time for this, or it would feel too vulnerable to connect with that part. But that is the essential part to create a bigger cohesive system so that we are not resisting ourselves so much more. I know this is kind of getting heady, but as we start to heal the inner parts of ourselves that are desperate for attention, we cultivate the safety within ourselves so that everything doesn't feel so chaotic and stressful, intense all the time. And we can kind of quiet that inner critic, that inner voice that is telling us that we need to do more, achieve more, be more, show up more. Instead, we can give these silent or these more silent, these suppressed parts more attention, and we can start to heal those parts within us. Regulation is the third. Like I said earlier, we cannot heal or help or support a dysregulated child when we are dysregulated ourselves. And dysregulation comes from feeling chronically stressed, chronically tired, chronically overwhelmed. Our nervous system is quite literally on such high alert all the time that our processing centers are shut down. Our ability to communicate and our ability to make decisions, rational decisions, decisions from a place of thoughtfulness, decisions from a place of viewing all sides, that is actually shut down when we are in a place of chronic stress and when cortisol and adrenaline are flooding our systems. So how can we put into practice regulation moments, pockets of time where we start to expand our nervous system for more, expand our nervous systems to be able to hold space for pockets of discomfort? Because when we are constantly go, 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 and we get hit with something out of the blue that is even more uncomfortable than we already are in, our regulation is going to go completely offline even further, and we will be unable to regulate and manage our reactions. So how can we put in pockets of time where we regulate ourselves? This looks like breath. This looks like noticing sensations in our bodies. This looks like taking a few seconds to say a mantra. This is when we are transitioning from one space to the next, from one interaction to the next, giving ourselves something that fills us a little bit more. I am capable of handling what comes. I will notice when I'm unable and I'll take a moment. It's really hearing what's happening in your body, noticing the sensations, and giving yourself the time and attention to witness those sensations and support those sensations. So, how can we add regulation into our body? And the fourth is play. And obviously, this makes sense for a child because play is where they are so open to learning and when they are so connected to us, right? That is their job. That is actually their life source. But for us, we've systematically stripped play out of our day, out of our life, so that we are really adult. We are really rigid. We are just falling in line with the system, right? And the system has failed us. The system has failed us as adults because play is what truly brings us a sense of joy, a sense of happiness, makes us feel alive, makes us feel like ourselves. So, how can you add silliness? How can you add play? How can you add the things that fill you up back into your life? And play for you might look like going for a walk. It might look like feeling sun on your skin during the day. It might look like noticing a bird. It might look like reading. It might look like dancing. It might look like cooking. It might look like playing a game or being silly or rolling on the floor or being active. What does play look like to you? What feels nourishing in your body? That is your play. So how can you start to incorporate play into your day? And this might sound like, oh my God, Becky, I don't have an hour or two to add to this stuff. And I get it. But what I am trying to say is, how can you add 3 minutes? How can you add 30 seconds of these things into your day so you feel more satiated, so you feel more attuned, so you feel more open, more relaxed, more complete, less resentful? So these are the 4 buckets that we can focus on with our kids. But when we shift the mindset and focus on ourselves as well, that is really where the integration and the embodiment of this practice of being responsive, not just as a parent, but to yourself. Because when we cultivate the sense of safety within ourselves, we can then turn towards others with less resentment, with more openness, and with more capacity to do what we would like to do, to follow the path that we are choosing to follow. I hope that is insightful and inspiring. And I cannot wait to hear what you do in your day to fill your 4 buckets. Okay, I'll see you next week.
Thank you for listening to the Response Able Parenting Podcast. If you like what you heard, please take a moment to rate, review, and subscribe. If you know someone who would benefit from this podcast, I'd be honored if you'd share this episode with them. Until next time, know that you are enough, you are capable, you've made it through all of your hardest days, and we will keep growing on this parenting journey together. This podcast was produced by Kim Kelty and myself, Becky Jennings, and edited by the Kelty Method, Branding and Podcasting.